Hello and welcome to the third weekly Kescast English podcast. And today I'm joined on my right by
Daniel Paolo.
And on my left by
Tom Lewis.
And we're going to be discussing which character is most important in the JB Priestley play, An Inspector Calls. And Tom, who are you going to be talking about today?
I'll be talking about Sheila Burling.
Dan, who are you?
I'm going to be talking about Sybil Burling, Sheila's mum.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so, Tom, I'm going to come to you first. Give me a general outline as to why you believe Sheila Burling is the most important.
Well, I think that to determine who's the most important character in the novel, we need to understand the purpose of the play. So Priestley was aiming to spark change amidst the contemporary audience regarding the class system of England at that time. He was very much a socialist and he worked for the Labour Party. To do this, he uses characters to set examples of how we should and indeed shouldn't behave. But to me, it's not most important to look at how the characters change in light of the inspector's revelations, but to what extent they change. Right. And of course, the character which changes the most in this novel is Sheila Burling.
Interesting. Okay. Dan, give me a general outline of your argument.
Well, I believe that Sybil Burling is almost the face of cold-hearted capitalism that J.B. Priestley is trying to drive us, the audience, against in order to promote his socialist views. I believe she's ignorant and she gets many things wrong, and this causes the audience to again hate her. She also propounds the relationships between men and women of earlier, and she's so significant as she actually causes a disruption in the structure of the play in order to maximise the dramatic effect of what she did, of course, with her son Eric.
Interesting. Okay, Tom, back over to you. You were talking about the importance of a character being defined by to what extent they change. So can you give me some evidence that backs up this point, saying that, say, Sheila Burling changes to a higher extent than Miss Burling?
Well, at the very start of the play, from the first page, the stage directions tell us that Sheila Burling is rather excited and extremely happy with life, right, which presents her as quite a childish and almost fickle character, in that, she's very pleased with herself, she's married well, she's, as Sybil says, she's secured her entire future, but she is clearly an adult, right? But she's also babied very much, so there's a quote which is, "Yes, go on, mummy," which shows that she's not quite an adult and she doesn't quite have that independence which she probably should have if she's getting engaged. Furthermore, the early exchanges of the play are really dominated by the Burlings, the Mr. and Mrs. Burling, and this sort of shows the generational difference, is that they have the authority in the family. Yeah. But after Sheila learns of her involvement with the death of and the suicide of Eva Smith and Daisy Renton, who it emerges the same person, she turns into a much more self-aware character, I would say. Right. And she is truly sorry, and I think this genuine sorrow is shown by when the inspector says, "You can't even say, 'I'm sorry, Eva Smith.'" Sheila, stage direction, crying, says, "That's the worst of it," which shows she really is truly sorry, which I think very few of the other characters sort of demonstrate. Eric, I would say, expresses a bit of remorse, but her parents not at all. And right. I think this sort of shows how society should act, and it's Priestley saying that we need to take a little bit more responsibility and notice those around us.
I see. So you're saying that this emotional journey of maturity that she goes through, that's fundamental to why she's the most important character.
Yeah, I think the play could almost be seen in a way as sort of an extended metaphor for her growing up. Right. I mean, in the beginning she's presented as, she's very happy. She gets sort of reprimanded for still admiring her ring. But by the end she's controlling the conversation. She has the most lines in the last act of the play, and she says, "I know I'm to blame." She will never do it again, which shows she's learned, unlike Mrs. Burling. And I think it brings up an interesting contrast between mother and daughter, and it gets rid of sort of the gender differences of the time, which were quite extreme, really, even though it was still, early 20th century. But it really shows the generational differences, which are interesting to explore.
Okay. So, Dan, back over to you. Tom was talking about this emotional journey, which... Obviously, would you say that Miss Burling goes on a journey such as this?
Definitely not. There's no progression in her character throughout the play.
Right.
As she says, I only did my duty. And towards the end of the play, once the inspector's left, she says, he didn't make me confess to anything, which I think sums up her character.
What about the sort of relationships and ignorance that she has? What would you say about that?
Well... Ignorance. First of all, she's ignorant to Eric's drinking problem, which she did. When she finds out that Eric's raped Daisy Renton, she says, "Oh, Eric, I did." She says, "I didn't know. I didn't know you had such problems." And I guess this could be a representation of her general ignorance, and of course, what she embodies: the ignorance of the upper class of society's problems.
Right.
She's she's also ignorant about Gerald's business with Daisy Renton. As she says at the start of the play, when you're married, you'll realise men spend all of their time and energy on their business. Obviously, this is ironic, because we as the audience realise that Gerald has been using Daisy as a mistress. And, this shows her this shows her as, again, ignorant. And obviously, as the audience, we begin to detest her as the play goes on.
Interesting. Okay, Tom, back over to you. You've touched a little bit on Sheila's relationship with Miss Burling. What would you say about her relationship to other characters in the play, and why that might make her important?
Well, the relationship between mother and daughter, which you just mentioned, is quite important, I feel, because, as we know, it's all such an intrinsically close bond between them, yet their relationship seems quite cold and frosty, which just reflects Sybil Burling's nature, I would say. But there's a strong contrast between Mummy at the start of the play and then Stop It, Mother, where Sheila begins to interject and cut into Mrs. Burling's speech. And that I think that shows the change quite a lot. But in terms of other characters, her and Eric, the younger generation, very much have similar attitudes towards it. They both instantly take responsibility. Sheila says, "Oh, what I did was horrible, absolutely horrible." And I guess this once again shows the generational differences. So they're so different characters from their parents that I think Priestley's trying to say, be like Eric and Sheila. Don't be the grown-ups, because I think he was trying to say that the sort of capitalistic views were sort of out of date in early 20th century England.
I see. Okay. And would you say, again, Dan was talking about Miss Burling's ignorance. Would you say that Sheila has an aspect of that too?
Yeah, so I think when she first finds out about the murder, Sheila actually says, "I can't stop thinking about this girl, destroying herself so horribly. And I've been so happy tonight. Oh, I wish you hadn't told me." Which shows she's clearly affected initially, but also wishes she didn't know. So she has a sense of ignorance until she has her own responsibility, which I think is bad, really. I think, someone has died, you should care no matter what. Like, it's such a major and tragic event. Yet, Sheila's sort of shown as wishing she didn't know.
Yeah,
so
she's made it into her own problem, really.
Yeah, so I think this could show maybe her upbringing. Right. She's sort of been taught, especially by Mr. Burling, who says a man has to look after himself, and that it would be like bees in a hive if we all were responsible for each other, which is actually a bit ironic because bees have such an efficient system. So I guess that's dramatic irony and socialist propaganda from Priestley.
Oh, yeah.
But I think this could show how Sheila, has sort of grown up in an environment where caring about other people's feelings isn't really a priority.
I see. Okay, so, Dan, I'm going to take it back over to you for a final time. If you were to write about this character, like what points would you just have to include? What would be the points that would do you well?
Well, I would have to say that as an audience, we are almost driven against her, as obviously her cardinal sin is denying aid to Daisy in her greatest time of need, and she even admits to the inspector, "I was prejudiced against her case," which she said she was presumptuous for using the name Burling, and she changed her story during the course of the interview for the charity. But surely this is reasonable behaviour from a lady on the edge of society. Without the money, she wouldn't be able to survive, so of course she'd claw for every opportunity she could to just achieve that money, because obviously she'd exhausted all the other possibilities by then. The only other option for her would be, sadly, to drink bleach and suicide.
I see, okay. And Tom, give me your final overview, those killer points.
Well, as I've said, Priestley uses Sheila to present his socialist views and how we should all take a bit more responsibility for the members of our community. And I think the quotation, "You don't seem to have learnt anything," and it doesn't really make any difference, when they think it's been a fake inspector, really shows that she's taken this message on board. And the ending of the play really shows us that the older members of the Burling family, and to an extent Gerald, really are not how we should be as members of society, and I think that's why Sheila is such an important character from Priestley.
Interesting. Great, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.